hit. Please
Okay.
introduce yourself and tell some people who the heck you are, because I know you, but they don't.
All right. I'm Tom Ballard, the groundwater guy. I'm a consulting hydrogeologist that does probably really a niche, a pretty niche market, I like to call it. I do water well diagnostics, water well location. I also do consulting training, so some technical and managerial training for water utilities, and that's pretty much what I do. Cover a wide range of topics.
Is the first question. And that is, what are the most significant challenges you face in transforming workplace culture and leadership within your organization? I know you're pretty much a private individual now, but you have been that leader, and that's why this is still very relevant. And you lead other things, right? Your
Yeah.
workshops and so on.
We do, and I mean, there's two sides to that coin. There's when you work with a client is transforming them, plus where I've been, I have worked. I'm independent now, but I have worked for consulting firms, and so it's really a matter of you you often get clashes between company culture that's kind of ingrained and kind of been that way for forever, and then what you need to do to really update things. And I'll give you an example here. There's a back in oh man, it's I don't remember the year, but I had a small business that ended up merging with a little bit bigger consulting firm, and I brought some of my people along, and I had an admin person, and she kind of joined the admin team, and this company had a certain situation where when you kept your invoice files and your invoicing files, you used blue paper for certain things, and to keep the notes on and stuff like that. And it was kind of like, well, and that was just the way it was done. You used blue paper for this. Well, what and so she started kind of questioning that. It's kind of saying, well, we can save some money by not having to buy the blue paper, special order stuff, and no, you got to use the blue paper. Well, you start digging in a little bit, and you find out that the reason they use the blue paper is one time, a long time ago, they ran out of white paper, and all they had was blue paper, so they started printing stuff on blue paper, and then it just kind of became the company tradition. That's what it was, is you always use blue paper. Nobody understood the origin of this thing till you start digging in, and when you think about it, it makes no sense at all. But that was just kind of the way it was done, and nobody ever questioned that. And that is kind of, in a nutshell, to me, the clash between corporate culture, company culture, the way it's always been done, and what you really need to do to stay apace of the current markets, current technology. And so many things are changing so fast these days that you got to keep up. And if you have your stay at old ways, using blue paper where white would have been just fine, as the example, then it's you're going to get left behind, and you're going to lose business because you're not staying on top of things. So you really need to have a corporate culture of be willing to adapt anyway. And when I was working on my MBA, there was one thing I really, the management classes were mostly pretty blasé. You don't remember a lot of things, but the one thing I remember from my management class was the resistance to change thing. And it is very difficult to change corporate culture. You can't do it in big steps. You got to do it in little baby steps. And people get frustrated with that. They want to come in and they want to change things, and they get a lot of pushback and resistance. So you got to do it a little bit at a time, and that's how it happens. And you have to have some patience. And a lot of us don't have the patience to do that. We want to see big results and big changes. But when it comes to changing corporate culture, it's big changes. You see it all the time. Some of these, huge companies try to just go in and change culture, and it ends up being a disaster a lot of times. And it works, just the same for a small to medium-sized business. Is that, corporate culture is hard to overcome, and in order to change it, it has to be a gradual, slow type of thing. So that's the one thing that probably the only thing that stuck with me from my MBA management class is that resistance to change thing. But it really is true. I mean, whether it's and I'm on a local school board, same type of thing. You can't go in there and change a lot of things. It's got to be kind of a gradual process. So it doesn't matter the organization. It's really the whole this is the way we've always done things type of thing without ever examining why you do that way. And so whether it's company culture, whether it's government, whatever it is, change is a process that takes a little bit of time, and you have to do it incrementally and not all at once. So huge lesson to me, and that's always kind of stuck with me when you do these things.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, this comes up against a few things that resonate with me. First of all, it's evolutionary biology. Anytime your brain, which is way hungrier, about 12 and a quarter, 12 and a half times more energy intensive than the rest of our body, it's like 2% of our body mass, but uses on average 20% of our glucose, our calories. If nobody had a six-pack, or that everybody had a six-pack probably in, let's call it caveman days for lack of a better term, or prehistory, because everybody was on the edge of starvation, so it was easy to have a six-pack. But one of the best ways to save energy, I have an acronym about, my clone acronym, and people are by evolutionary default comfort-seeking, lazy, overeating, negative, and emotional. And that's because in history, that was adaptive. By saving energy, by resisting change and doing stuff the same way, which is how most people did it all their lives, pre-industrial revolution, you stayed alive. You didn't starve to death, and things were easy because you were already good at the things you needed to be good at, and it worked. It's if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which is not a bad approach, provided it still serves you. So that, and something specific to Japan, which I find very funny and sort of interesting. Japan's a very unique culture. And because there's always this marriage of sort of ancient and traditional and modern, you'll see a 7-Eleven and a pachinko parlor and vending machine, which could be selling almost anything you can imagine. But between those, you may see a tiny little Shinto temple or a tiny little Buddhist temple that's like 2 meters wide. And to them, it's like, what? There was space for it. We like them. It can go there. And they don't even see that because that's just sort of their culture. But Japanese people will openly and honestly admit something most people and cultures will not, which is what this comes down to, is people. Because as you said, it's independent of the organization. And that is, people by default hate change. In Japan, they say Japanese people don't like change. And then they oftentimes laugh together in unison. Like, isn't this obvious? And yet in the West, people would be like, I'm flexible. They'll resist even being honest about the fact that it's natural to resist change. So I really relate to your answer in so many levels. Okay, so the next one is, could you describe a recent situation, or in this case, maybe a situation when you had your company, either one that works for me, and that is where you felt your leadership team could have benefited from additional training and guidance in, say, culture building or leadership?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have, the company I worked for before I went back off on my own. They ended up getting sold at a fire sale price because of the lack of leadership. It's interesting, and this is an interesting story, and there's a little lesson here too. Is that the guy who was running the company at the time, his dad started the company back in the 50s. Brilliant engineer, well respected in the industry, and his name was well known, and people still know his name years after his death and all that is because he was a giant in the industry. His son, went out and got an MBA and, supposedly, and thought he was this brilliant leader like his dad, and he wanted to emulate his dad. He was horrible. Had no clue. I don't know where he got it, whether he got his MBA from the back of a magazine, or he mailed off for a diploma or whatever, but really no lack of leadership and wanted to dictate how things were done and falling back on tradition and that type of thing, but not a very good leader, not a very inspiring leader. And as a result, people kind of mocked him behind his back, and not that doesn't go on, almost anywhere, but in this case, it was pretty extreme. And so he did not have the vision, I guess, and certainly not the self-awareness to be a good leader. And I think self-awareness is an important component of being a good leader, is, understanding how you relate to people and doing honest self-assessment on that. You got to step back and kind of look, and it's very difficult to do, but you got to step back and look at how, you're impacting other people and not have a fragile ego that you can't deal with the answers. And that's part of it. So we really, we do these kind of like leadership retreat types of things once a year and stuff. And it was mainly him talking to us. There was no real training or anything like that. He could have really benefited from somebody coming in and saying, Andy, you really need to kind of, get your act together and here's where you're deficient and you need to work on these things and do that type of thing. But his ego would not allow it. And that's a real thing is people become leaders of organizations. They think they are supposed to know all the answers, which is just not true, but they think they are, and they think it's a sign of weakness if you don't know the answer. Therefore, they're just making crap up,
Yeah.
gotta, and just gotta, pardon me for putting it that way, but it really is, they're just, and it's kind of like I'm saying it, so that's the way it is, instead of really understanding or saying, hey, I don't know, but let's figure this out. That is, to me, that's a sign of being a good leader, and not just thinking you have to know all the answers all the time. Nobody can. And everybody recognizes that, and we all make
Right.
mistakes, and owning up to your mistakes and saying, look, this didn't work. Let's, we gave it a shot. It didn't work. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Didn't work. Let's cut our losses and go to plan B or change things up or scrap that and move on and being willing to admit that. A lot of leaders are not. They'll stay with things and they'll throw money into bad projects because to do otherwise would admit that they failed, and that's a huge blow to their ego. So I would say, and I kind of got off the topic here a little bit on leadership training, but really it's a matter of, you got your hardcore leadership training, and then you kind of have the what is the emotional intelligence type of thing where it's your ego getting in the way of doing that, and it stops people from getting the training that they might actually need and benefit from. Say, I don't have all the answers, let me turn to somebody else here that might be a specialist, and I'll get some insights to be a better leader. And and I'm not, I think there are natural leaders out there, but even a natural leader can benefit from insights from other people that we're kind of, if I can put it this way, we're the sum of our experiences, and somebody else might have a completely different set of experiences that we can benefit from because we have not gone through those particular sets of challenges. and learned from those and drawn the conclusions from those. And so that's where we can get benefit from looking at some of these other things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I just recently finished, as you know, I love to listen to books. And I just finished listening to Ed Catmull's update on Creativity Inc. And it very much goes into that. And I don't think you actually wandered off the path. I just think you went to the core of the path. Excuse me for a second. My last interviewee talked about exactly that. The first thing she said on the first question is it's about the human factor. And it's so true. What you were talking about is a leader who was delusional about his leadership ability and wasn't open to finding that out, because after all, I'm the boss, you don't tell me what to do. Whereas you look at truly exceptional leaders, look at Ray Dalio, look at Ed Catmull, look at Reed Hastings from Netflix. All of these leaders, it's like, in the case of Ray Dalio, you can actually be fired for not bringing up an objection that's based on not just opinion, but some valid knowledge or experience, right? So for example, if they're talking about some investment they're going to make and you're in the back of the room, regardless of who you are, you might just be someone's cousin visiting, but they would actually like to hear from you because, it's like, well, excuse me, I might just be here visiting my cousin, but I'm a hydrogeologist. And what you just said is completely false. And if you use that to make the decision, you're making a bad decision. Great leaders are willing to say stuff like, and great experts. This is one of my differentiations for detecting experts, because there's so many people who are full of crap on the internet selling themselves as experts. You won't hear a faker usually say, I don't know, I think that, let me get back to you, because they're faking it and they know it, even if we don't, even if they're a good actor, and most of them aren't, right? Their credibility is so fragile that they can't say, well, you know what? Turns out that I don't know everything, and I knew that. And anybody with deeper knowledge of anything knows that they don't know everything. And if somebody says such and such neuroscience, what do you think, Tim? It was like, I think that, or I have no idea, is something I'm much more likely to say. If I have a working hypothesis, I'll say that. I'll say, well, I think this is probably true or not true, but I'm not certain. I've never seen specific research on it. You will never see that from an insecure leader, a fake leader, or a fake expert, but the reverse is true. Like you said, maybe EQ is the main thing that's missing from leadership training, because I think maybe, well, it is that, and the other part you said, which is about what's called group genius or wisdom of the crowds. There's a guy named Sir Francis Galton found this out like 100 years ago. He was an elitist. And to his own disappointment, as a very good researcher and ethical about his research, he thought, all these dumb, uneducated people, we have to lead them because we're the elites and they're too dumb to know better. But maybe you've heard about this, where they guessed the dressed weight of an ox, and the mean average of the whole crowd's, it was within 1 pound. And it isn't as simple as just canceling out mistakes and stupidity. It just turns out mathematically that it's true that a collective crowd is more intelligent than an individual the vast majority of the time, and it's inversely proportional to the size of the crowd. But even 5 or 10 people, after that, it becomes like a diminishing return. 10,000 people is barely smarter than 20 or 50 or 100. So you're being a terrible leader if you're not willing to tap into the collective knowledge and experience of your reports, of your employees. So the next question is, what specific outcomes would you hope to achieve through training in leadership and culture building? That is, if you were to do that or to recommend that to clients, or when you were working with these people, what would be the thing you're really looking for people to get out? It's like, this is what we want as a result of this. What would that be for you?
Well, it's pretty much kind of what what you were just talking about is, as a leader, to adapt your techniques so that you go and consult your people more. I mean, you're hiring supposedly the best and the brightest, hopefully. And so you use those talents, and I see in a lot of companies where people are frustrated because they're coming into a company, with a lot of inspiration and looking on the bright side and looking forward to doing things. And then the leadership does not even begin to scratch the surface on the talents these people bring. And that happens way too often, and is tragic because as a company, you have, like you were just saying, there's a lot of collective intelligence there and experience and so much problem solving capability. And you look at the really successful people out there, take just Apple, for instance, is they, they've kind of gotten away from that in recent years, but back in the earlier days under Steve Jobs was a brilliant leader because he may have been kind of hard to get along with sometimes, a little quirky, but boy, he let the people in his organization really flourish and had the ability to run with things, and that happens a lot in the tech sector, I think, more than some of these other staid industries out there where innovation by individuals just is not encouraged. But you have all that talent. You've hired these brilliant people, supposedly. Why not unleash them and see where it goes? At the very least, you can look at it and say, they come to you and say, well, I don't think this is going to work for this reason or not, but don't discourage them from ever starting down that particular path. And I think that's really where, if you're, in this theoretical management training you're talking about here, that's something that should really be encouraged with people. And I don't see that being actually taught, MBA or whatever, and admittedly it's been, for a couple centuries since I did my MBA, or at least that's what it seems like.
It's
But
brief. Sorry to
but
interrupt, Tom, but I have to put in this joke because of who you are. Think of how long it's been since you've done your MBA. It's very brief on a geological scale.
Yeah, that is true. So on the geological scale, it is not much time. But seriously, that was not something we got taught in MBAs. And I would venture a guess that current MBA programs do not, even the management end of things, probably do not really teach that because I think MBA programs, a lot of the leadership stuff is really teaching you how to be a strong leader, but I'll go back to, we can't know everything. And like you said, as far as I'm concerned, I'll get back to you is an acceptable answer because, that's an honest answer. If I don't know, I'll go find out because I want to know too. I want to provide a good answer to my client, but I want to know for future reference. So I keep a stockpile of not just the employees in the company, but as an independent now, I have kind of a go-to list, and I suspect most people probably do, of experts that I can go and consult on things that I don't know. It's kind of like a brain trust, not really a mastermind, but almost like a brain trust that you can tap into if you need to, that reliable experts, this person is an expert in this area, this person is an expert in this area, and you can go to that person and get some information. You go, wow, I didn't think of that, and so then you can go back to your client and give them a good, reliable answer that comes from an expert in the field. And I think you look good. You don't look weak because you're turning to somebody else. You're doing the right thing. And I think people respect you more for that. And people that are insecure as a leader, they're afraid to do that because it looks like weakness, and it is not, absolutely not. So it's getting it out of your head that is weakness, and it really comes down to, how do I best serve my clients and my customers? And by turning to somebody else that is more of an expert than I am is the ultimate goal of best serving your customer and giving the best service possible.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm going to give you one ridiculous reference. And then, but first of all, I'm going to say something about in Robert Cialdini's book, in his latest book, the Influence, but the new and expanded, which is literally 10 times better than the first one. It's so well done. Excuse me. He talks about Warren Buffett and research related to something that Warren Buffett does. So it's related to influence and persuasion. But he says research shows that somebody who early in an interaction admits or points out something they've done which was a mistake, that is a deficiency which sort of works against their own interest, and not even necessarily superficially, but really is like, I screwed up. He starts all of his annual reports with what he did wrong, and the effect of that in like I said, in the realm of persuasion, but exactly what you're talking about. Essentially what it is the sooner you admit something that is true and honest, but against your better interest, the rest of that interaction, they will trust you more about everything you say. Because it's like, this is somebody who has the integrity to tell me when they either don't know something or the mistake they made, followed by anything you say, I have more reason to believe you're telling me the truth. And that's what the research bears out. So regarding expertise and stuff, just imagine this. I'm a Japanese individual who barely speaks English. I come to you as a native speaker in any capacity, and I say, okay, look, I would like you to teach these 2-year-olds more familiar nursery songs that I know, and I don't want you to use the laser, which I used to shine it at the ground because it was COVID, so I couldn't touch them. But I could do a laser high five. I shine it on the ground and then they could slap it. I called it a laser touch. And they loved it. But this wise leader who barely spoke English and knew nothing about teaching or education was telling me, the songs you're choosing aren't the right ones because I don't know them. And the 2-year-olds aren't familiar with them. They're 2-year-old, zero beginner, non-native speakers. Of course, they haven't heard every song, but it's just an example of exactly that. It's like, I'm the leader, I know better. It's like, why did you hire me if you're so knowledgeable about this? You go teach the English class. I'll go home and go back to bed because it's early in the morning. I'd rather not be here. But shockingly, it's like me saying to you, no, Tom, you're wrong. That isn't the way hydrogeology works. I can't even imagine a situation where I could do that without laughing out loud. Oh, and yet people do it all the time. Like you said, they so desperately want to be the boss and the one in the know instead of going, I don't know about that. So I'm so on board. I've had that experience many times from, like I said, non-native speakers teaching me how to teach English and how to speak English. Now we need to use katakana because Timu is your name. It's like, actually, that's not my name. My name is Tim. And if they say it wrong, this will not help them improve their speaking. So, it happens everywhere at all levels in organizations across cultures. So the next one then is, in your opinion, what are the key skills and competencies that leaders should possess to create a thriving organizational culture?
Well, I heard it once said is that God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, and they should be used in roughly that proportion. And it's, listening is more important than talking. And I've worked with some people in the past. I worked with one guy, an engineer. I worked with that. I joined his company for a number of years, and it's just like he'd love to hear himself talk, and just talk, and nobody could fit a word in edgewise. And as a consequence, you don't know what's going on. You need to spend more time listening than you do talking, and that is really an important skill, and it's a lot harder than you really think, because we want to get our 2 cents worth in, and we want to show that we know what we're talking about and stuff like that. But a lot of times I've found with clients is that if you listen and you say just enough to keep the conversation going, they will tell you exactly what they need, what their problems are, and give you a hint at which direction the solutions need to go in order to satisfy what they need. And that then becomes the basis for your solution. And subconsciously, then, they're liking the solution you're presenting them because they've actually already articulated in their words to you, what they're looking for. And that is something that a lot of people that are in marketing and sales, especially, do not do. They want to tell you all about their great solution and just beat you over the head with it. We are not selling, for the most part, we're not selling used cars, folks. We're, if we're in the professional services business, like I am, then you really want to listen to what your clients need and find out what their points of pain are, and then get the hint on what solution they're looking for. That puts you on the right path, and that's really the basis for the solution that's going to work for them, instead of giving them your one size fits all solution. We don't live in a one size fits all world, and so you need to adapt to your client, and the only way you can do that is by listening. So I think that's a huge skill that most people, it's hard for most people. They want to talk a lot more than they listen, because it's hard to just shut up and listen. It really is, I mean, even if you know the secret, it's hard to shut up and listen. So, I mean, because just, with this interview here, I've been on the flip side, where I'll interview people for my show, because I do a YouTube show on hydrogeology, and when I interview people, my tendency is to, I go back and I look at the interview and said, I talked way too much in that interview. I need to shut up, get out of the way, let them speak, and listen to what they have to say, because what's the point of having them on otherwise? So, and that works, when you're working on solutions with people. Like I say, they'll give you the answers, or they'll at least tell you what they need, and just by listening. Ask a few questions to keep the conversation directed, and then listen. And so that's really vital. I put that kind of above everything, is use your ears.
Yeah, I like that. And because we know each other fairly well, and we worked or we're in a lot of conversations together online, we're both talkers. We know this. And what I thought was interesting when COVID happened is to learn that the inability to stop talking, or the challenge to stop talking, and the ability to listen, and how difficult it is to listen, it isn't just me, and it's not even that I'm an exception. When you go to a networking event and you find people, I remember one specific example where it was like an addictions counselor, like literally a professional listener. And I had to interrupt and say, excuse me, please understand that there's many other people who have to go and we're running out of time. They hated me, but the host thanked me. And I'm not doing this as somebody who's saying, well, I'm a great listener. It's like, I recognize your challenge. I'm the one who has to strive to shut the heck up. Just like, so for example, in this interview, I'm using a technique I developed years ago that I still struggle to use. I literally press my lips together. It's like, I will feel my lips until they stop talking, or I have something that really I have to say just now before I forget. It puts me in mind of, have you ever seen the movie Fight Club?
I don't think I've ever actually seen the full movie, but I've probably seen enough video clips of it
Right.
that I felt like I've seen the whole movie.
Right. So there's a scene where Helena Bonham Carter and Edward Norton are hugging. So they're in like I think it's like the testicular cancer trauma group. And of course, it's kind of strange to have a woman in it. But they're basically addicted to going to these groups, and they're hugging each other. And this is the reason I come here, is because here people really listen. They're not just waiting for their turn to talk. And that is so true that I have never forgotten it. I couldn't agree more. And I get the challenge. I think our family, either by culture or by genetics, is a talker, but I know it's me in particular, contrasted to the rest of my family. My father was and I am. Everybody else in the family are still talkers, but it's clear that I have that particular both affliction and power. And that's why these interviews are so good for me, is it's where talking is a strength, but the challenge is to not talk too much, which is what I'm trying to do with this interview for the most part. So I'm going to stop after asking you the next question. So that is, what do you think is the ideal duration for a comprehensive leadership training course?
I've kind of shifted my thinking on and it really depends on whether it's in person or online. So I don't know, if you want to cover that, but I think that if you're doing things online, like a lot of things are these days, I really think you kind of can break it up into, like no more than 1 hour segments per day and maybe run it for 5 days. But I think, if you're doing a leadership training in person, then probably a 2 day course, I wouldn't do more than 2 days. I think people lose focus after 2 days. If you're doing online, I think focus is more of an issue, because there's so many distractions. You're checking your email and your text messages, and people are coming into your office and this and that, so I think for online, the strategy is to break it into smaller segments over a period of days, and you get a lot better attention and focus from people. If you're doing it in person, obviously people are paying to be there, and it's easier to focus if you're in one place. But I wouldn't do it for more than 2 days, because I think people lose focus after a couple of days, even if you're breaking it up, things like, all the little, uh, icebreaker things and stuff that everybody hates. And I know I hate those things, but I know you got to do them, but I really hate them. But even if you're kind of breaking things up that way, or with little focus groups and things, I think 2 days is probably the max for in person. And then online strategy, I'm really shifting my thinking on that, and trying to do, even the training I do for water districts, on the management side is more, I'll do it, maybe for 1 or 2 hours a day for several days in a row, and kind of get it done that way. And shorter segments, people can focus more and get more out of it, I think works. So.
Right. It's interesting that you talked about sort of the idea of an intensive 2 day, because that was the precise answer from my last interviewee, that she thought that was sort of optimal, especially in an in-person, or to hit the ground running, and then potentially some after the fact support, even if it's just with the trainees themselves, amongst themselves, or available through other leaders who are available at least some of the time, maybe once a week. Towards what you were talking about, the online format. Yeah, feel free to drink at any time. I'm not really fussy. If you can say something that I'll edit out, I will be shocked. Okay. I know you well enough to know it's unlikely you would say something like that. I might, but you probably wouldn't. Okay, so sort of the science / neuroscience of it over the years, I've seen ranges that would suggest from about 40 or 45 minutes up to a maximum of about 90. Because for 45 minutes seems to be 45 seems to be a sweet spot, with just even a short break, 5 or 10 minutes, and then just do that. And something called ultradian rhythms, which are the same as, we have them during the day and at night. So during the day, we have like a curve that goes up, and it goes through, it's basically a sinusoidal curve, but it's lopsided because the down times are actually shorter. So at night, we go down to deep sleep. We come up, we have about a 20-minute brief period of dreaming sleep or thereabouts at the top, but not going awake. And then we go back down for another 90 minutes. Now that flips 180 degrees in the daytime. So we have an increased metabolism and alertness for about 90 minutes. And then we drop down for a diminished capacity for about 20 minutes. So based on that, not on attention specifically, but on that metabolic and alertness thing. That's what the range I would say so far I've seen that suggests, yeah, 40 to 90 minutes with a 20-minute break, and not a break where everybody still talks about it so much as just relax, play video games, get to know each other, whatever it is. Literally encourage them to completely disengage from what you're doing, because doing emails on the side is not a good way to regenerate. If it's sort of like, well, I'm doing office work, now I'm doing emails for office work. You've never really disengaged. And our brain does far better to have breaks where it is literally, okay, I'm just going to stare at a picture of a drone flying over a beautiful scene for 20 minutes at work because I'll get more done, right? I don't know that will be adopted anytime soon, but the research probably supports it. So the next question then is, what factors would sort of influence, because you were talking about sort of the ideal duration. So what factors would influence your decision about what is the ideal duration, and whether it's like, this course seems to be the one that my employees or our organization really needs? What would be the main factors that would help you decide yay or nay, this is the ideal duration or not?
Well, it really depends on your particular attention span. Like you talked about, we go through those rhythms, but I just, it's more just experience. My experience is that in-person conferences, for instance, there may be some great talks. There's going to be some mediocre talks. There's going to be some talks that aren't so good, when you got multiple speakers, as opposed to, like one main speaker kind of doing a whole, leadership training, and then brings in a few people here and there, but he's the main leader. I tend to check out after like a couple days. I'm kind of losing focus after a couple days. I can usually sustain it, and go for a couple days, but after a couple days, then I know personally I'm mentally checking out of things, and I'm kind of just going through the motions, or more just hanging around to network with folks, and waiting for the breaks, or cocktails in the evening. The afternoon cocktail break, or whatever. Probably don't even really do that, but just kind of, you get the idea.
I do.
So that's kind of how I looked at it based on my personal experience, and people I've talked to, and things I've tried, it seems like that's kind of optimal. These week-long things, I think, you end up with people kind of wandering around and not really paying attention, or, and even these conferences that have trade shows attached to them, even the trade shows start to lose attendance after the first day or two that they're open, so so there's a certain attention span that people can focus on these things. And then it's more just a matter of, hanging out and having dinner, and, and chatting with somebody you knew from a past conference. And so, and that can be valuable, but, what are you really there for? So that's kind of, that answer is kind of heavily biased towards my personal experience, but what I know, and I'm kind of, some of my own training, I'm trying to, adapt that, and I've had, for instance, water system operators. So let me look at that way. So I do online stuff and I do in-person stuff. The online stuff is I've had better success is doing like an hour or to 2 hours, somewhere in that range, first thing in the morning. Then they can get to what they need to do during the day, and they're still fresh at that. It's better than doing that than in the afternoon. For instance, when they may not show up because they got stuck on this, this or that. And so get it out of the way first thing in the morning when everybody's fresh, they've had their cup of coffee, they can focus. You don't make it too long. And, so that works online, and I've had better success with that than doing an all day online thing. It just, seems to work less. So, and, so kind of based on my personal experience of some things I've tried, I guess. I haven't tried
Mhm.
everything, so there's a little bit of bias in it based
Right.
on my personal experience.
But to put a
Well, as
specific
putting on
point on
things
that,
on, what's
mhm.
that? Yeah.
To put a specific point on that, I did ask you, which is why your opinion matters, because this is about your experience. But I like what you said too. Like for me, first thing in the day, so let's be clear about what that is. That means sometime after 5 p.m., preferably 7 or 8 p.m. local time. But absolutely, there's even sort of neuroscience and history behind that. When you look at it, people's willpower and attention span is basically controlled by glucose. Even judges, if you're going to go in front of a judge, Tom, I don't know if you've ever done anything to put you there, but
Not too
if you
often.
not that you've been caught for. Okay, so let let's go there for a second. You either, if you have any choice, if they say, well, you can appear first thing in the day, first thing in the afternoon, or any other time, you want to appear either first thing in the day after they've eaten breakfast or immediately after lunch, because, and this has been found widely and reproducibly all over the place, making a judgment. This was specifically about whether to get parole or not. It's a complex judgment that takes a lot of cognitive energy or a lot of sugar. And you literally see this plummeting curve. No decision, that is, no parole, is much easier to do. And that goes up rapidly as you move away from the last meal. So if you're ever in that position or any position where a judge has to make, or anyone has to make a complex decision, the further you get away from a meal, the less attention you have. So it really jibes. So I want to basically paraphrase you here, or at least see if I've understood this correctly. In a short part, we could just say the main variable for you is the attention of the audience you're serving.
Would think so. When are they most yeah, when are they most attentive? Their energy levels are highest, their attention span is the greatest. And
Mm-hmm.
you make a good point with the endorphins. Maybe you send a pizza to the judge before before you go before something like that. I don't know. But really, I mean, most people in my business on the water end of things these days is you get them first thing in the morning, and you're going to get a lot more attention. And you can tell just by the amount of questions you get and the feedback you get. I mean, when there's radio silence, when you're doing this teaching and there's radio silence, then you probably don't have their attention. If they're asking questions, then, and I'm kind of just kind of an aside, I'm kind of a non-linear presenter. So if people ask questions right then and there when it's in there, I'd rather have them do that than these people that say, leave your questions to the end. I absolutely hate that, because by the time you get there, you've forgotten what your question is. It's
Me
not
too.
relevant anymore. And it's just ask your questions when they're available, and I can pick back up where I was at, because I'm that's
I'm
kind of
with you
how I
on
do
that.
things.
So yeah, actually, go
It
ahead.
keeps that engagement keeps the attention span up, is really what it is. And you can
Mm-hmm.
tell what their attention span is by the engagement they're giving you.
Well, I like that. We're both empiricists, and that's exactly it. It was like, it doesn't even matter what you know or I know or what we think. It's what the results are that we achieve. And if we're foolish enough not to look at the results and learn from them, then we have some, go back to the self-reflectiveness and self-awareness. What you said about the, ask me a question when it arises. I personally, again, I hook everything to neuroscience, but it's also true. It makes sense, right? When you think about pairing things, if you stick your hand in a fire, how effective would it have been if your brain evolved to wait a few minutes? Will get this message back to you, or that the animal bites your hand, that there was a long delay between the bite and the pain. It would not have been good for our ancestors. Therefore, and this is true of animal training or something, right? So if you have an animal, and that animal, whether we're talking about, no kidding, a cockroach, a dog, or a human, because we're all animals of different types, the pairing between the behavior the target behavior or the behavior we want them to do, whether it's looking or doing a backflip or handing in their homework, and the reinforcing reward, the unconditioned reward. Seconds matter. That if you wait, for example, if I say to you, you finish what you said, and then half an hour later I says, Tom, you made a great point there. And you're like, what point are you talking about? Right? Because there's no pairing. So that immediate, it's good for the audience, but it's also good for the way our brains learn. The learning cycle is really tight, right? If you can fractions of a second go, somebody puts up the hand, you go, yes. What's your question? You answer right there. It's good for you. It's good for them. It's good for the audience. Waiting until after, personally, I'm highly skeptical as to whether there's debatable research in both directions. I correct my students on their English or address a point immediately because I see massive personal as well as scientific evidence towards that. Waiting to the end, it was like, oh yeah, you answered my question. I really don't understand why I asked it anymore, is not a productive way to go in my mind. So I agree with you on that completely.
There's a little caveat to that, though, is you can't let people sidetrack the conversations, because some people will ask 25
Agreed.
questions and then, so you got to, as the speaker and the leader, you got to kind of give a concise answer and then get back to the presentation. So I think that's because otherwise people will sidetrack the conversation and then you're doing a disservice to everybody else. So that's the only caveat. But if you're an experienced speaker, you know how to handle that. Not let people sidetrack you. So
I hear you there too. Like my main leadership experience still comes down to classrooms, but whether you're dealing with 2-year-olds or C-suite executives, the management of a group is scarcely different, whether they like to hear that or not. And you got it, right? You say, yeah, here's the answer. And then, as you said, getting back to the path or disallowing somebody to take you off the path is just the way a professional handles that kind of stuff. So I love that. I just want to write something here because otherwise I'll forget it immediately. It's exactly what you're talking about here. Basically, concise answers, stay on the path, right? Because as you said, otherwise you're no longer considering the audience. And now you're losing everybody but the one person who wanted the most attention or is the most curious. And everybody else is now thinking about something else.
exactly.
Okay. So, and you've already answered this. So if you have something to add, great. If it's like asked and answered, I think you have, but it's not for me to decide. What formats of delivery methods would you say are most effective considering your schedule or your audience's schedule and learning preferences?
I think I mostly answered that, but I find that, there is a difference. I'll just say this. There's a difference in the crowd you get if you do in-person training versus online, because not everybody can afford the time to go for, to travel, stay in a hotel and take a couple full days to do some training, especially mid-level management type people. And so you'll get it kind of a different crowd I found in-person training as opposed to online, especially if you make the online in bite-sized chunks. So you may reach more people doing online training because it's easier for people to get on and interact and so I think that's an important distinction, and I think really training should be kind of ideally a hybrid type of thing where you do some in person, some online, so you can reach those different segments, and so I'll just leave it at that because I think that is an important distinction that I do see out there.
Yeah, I get you there. Again, agreed. And as you probably know from me, I don't just agree to agree. I disagree with everybody about something, but it so much makes sense, right? Because they sort of self-select, right? If somebody who's taking the time and money away from their organization or permission to go to something in person, there's a lot of valuable stuff like the nonverbal that you can't see, like you're seeing, you can't see below my high chest. there's a lot of communication that's missing, but the people who self-select to go to that are obviously by definition more motivated and or more able to pay attention intensively. But I really like your idea of just saying, well, make it hybrid. And even if some people can't attend the in-person, it gives that other element where the people who are motivated or can attend now get additional value, but you can still capture a really large audience or a large, serve a really large amount of people.
I do
So
think we're seeing kind of the rise of hybrid events out there, now that we're, past the whole COVID stuff and that's, so you're seeing some of that. We've taken what we learned during COVID, and we learned a lot during all those crazy lockdowns, is that we learned a lot about how to reach out to people. And so I think you're seeing more of the rise of the hybrid events. And, you can do the best of both worlds there, but they're a little more tricky to coordinate and set up too. And there's a little more expense to doing it. I mean, quite frankly, doing the online stuff, you can make it very elaborate. And I've seen some really elaborate online stuff, but generally the expense of doing an online training is going to be less than in person.
for sure.
So I think we're seeing the more you're going to see a lot more of the hybrid events, I think, coming out. So
I was shortly before this, actually, one of my students sent me a talk, a TED talk, which I always encourage them to do. And it was about how to retain Gen Z employees. And it was interesting because it very much talks about that most Gen Zs don't want to always go into the office, and they don't always want to be at home. In fact, they would use not having a combination or hybrid option for their employment as to not take the interview or to not work at that company. And I think the only reason it's different now than it was before is, as much as I have some very sort of critical opinions about Gen Y and Z as being maybe overly sensitive and unjustifiably confident because they were high-fived for breathing in class, that was not helpful. But the fact that they're saying, this isn't good. It wasn't good before, but especially yourself and me too, by and large, were more or less punished for questioning something that everybody thought was bad. So there's been a lot of learning that way too. Plus COVID, those two things together have given us a whole new perspective on sort of working and learning. So I think that's awesome stuff there. Next one is, when it comes to investing in leadership and culture development, what criteria do you consider when determining the value of a course?
It's really how practical it is. We can deal with a lot of theory, and I've seen some of these courses out there where it's all theory and no practical application. The people I deal with in the water industry, they want to know what I can do tomorrow, So you need to give them some tools that they can implement and add to their toolbox right away, and not give them a lot of theory. Now, for a different crowd, mixing in a little more theory might be good. But for people that are really more hands-on types of managers and stuff, they want practical information. So that's really important. Give them something they can apply right now, and gear your training towards that practical applications, and stay away from the theory so much, because it's I mean, obviously we need to throw a little bit of that in. So as far as the background, but the bulk of the training, at least in my segment, and I think this probably applies to a lot of the training out there, is make it hands-on and practical. I think, you as a trainer are going to see more success that way too, and get more positive feedback than just, throwing them a bunch of theory and then let them try to figure out how to make that theory fit. And we can do that through case studies. And you can also do it by incorporating some engagement into your training, where you can, and this can be challenging for trainers, but you ask people on the spot what their situation is. And usually what I do especially when I do the in-person stuff, but even online, I'll go around and ask people what their water system is, how many water wells they have, and specific issues they have. And I will address that during the course of my training. If they got a specific problem, I'll kind of, obviously I can't change up the PowerPoint right on the fly, but I can specifically address their issues for the most part um, during the training, and so I'll switch up what I'm saying during the appropriate part of the presentation and address their specific issues, and then I may even go back to them and say, does that answer your question that you or address some of your issues that you presented at the beginning? And so you can tailor it to your audience and make it a lot more practical to them, and I think that's part of the engagement thing. Easier to do in person than online. That is
Mm-hmm.
the big difference between in-person training and online training, is that the engagement, you got to work a lot harder at engagement online than you do in person. I mean, in person, I can go wander around, the people sitting there. I'm not a big one to stand behind a microphone and talk. I'll wander around and chat with people and make eye contact and things like that. And I think that increases engagement too. But actively bringing in what their specific issues are to the
Mm-hmm.
presentation makes it more meaningful. It gives them solutions that are adapted to their specific situation, and just makes the training more effective, I think, than that generic one size fits all presentation. We can't vary from the text that's on the PowerPoint slide.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you don't want to do that. So engaging people by addressing their specific issues makes it more practical, and giving them practical solutions they can take home and implement. And I've had evidence. I've had people get a hold of me after a presentation and say, that I took one thing that you told me and I went home and I applied it, and to my water system, and we checked this and that, and it's amazing how well that worked for me. It gave me information I didn't have before, or whatever it is. And so that feedback tells me you're on the right track with those types of presentations. So really engaging people in that, and addressing their specific issues, I think is very, very important. Like I say, harder to do online than in person, but you got to work a little bit harder at it online. But it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to get away from that mentality of, we're just going to throw up a bunch of PowerPoint presentations, and by golly, I'm gonna say this, no matter what. Now you gotta go off script. It's
Yeah.
more engaging to go off script, and memorable, and turns out to be more useful for the people that are in the audience anyway.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So I'm going to read you something just because it's highly relevant to what you say. When I teach English, but this is also related to anything you learn, and it's significant because it dovetails with what you're saying. When I get because I'm still teaching English students and probably will forever, but as a digital nomad, that is pretty soon I won't need to be in Japan. I can do this anywhere. I tell them, look, here's the best way to learn something. It should be frequent, challenging, engaging, applicable, meaningful, relevant, repetition with immediate expert feedback. That is literally a framework based on science and my many years of teaching. But the thing that jumped out was what you said is applicable. If somebody tells me all about their deep knowledge of the grammar of English, it's like, well, I don't teach grammar. I teach you how to use grammar that you can use in real life. And if you have the word monkey, you may feel proud that you know the word monkey, but exactly how often do you use that? If you can't apply it, if it's not immediately actionable within what you're trying to learn about, if you can't use it, it's useless. So, and what I really love there, you said about I'll go off script. I too love live for that very reason, and in person for that very reason. If you aren't capable, as the expert one claims to be, right? So I know you're an expert at hydrogeology. I don't have to doubt it. If you're not capable of going off script, then it's not especially great at establishing you as being the expert you claim to be. If somebody asks me something, I had somebody ask me at a live talk about basically the neuroscience of memory and learning. Well, Tim, what would be the ideal time for me to learn it? It's like, well, there's a lot of variables, but given the research on attention, probably the very best time, and this is, this is speculative, but after eating, because your attention is highest. And we know that to be the case. So any cognitively challenging task shortly after eating, when your blood sugar is higher, is more likely to be more effective. That's not all there is. There's that list I just said, but by and large, if you want one time specifically, that's what I would recommend. If you can't answer an unscripted question, then you should not be calling yourself an expert. Call yourself a novice or a speculator, but quit lying, because I, as a customer online, and I think most people, are just tired of these fake experts, because they're only fooling the people who know nothing about what they do. Everybody else with a sliver more than zero knowledge, it's just like, this person's full of crap and I know it, and they're gone. They're never going to get me or anybody else as a customer. Another movie reference. Have you seen Catch Me as If You Can, with Tom Hanks and Leonardo DiCaprio?
No, I've not seen
So
that.
it's an awesome movie. I would really encourage you to see it. It's about a con man who forges checks, and it's based on a true story of a guy named Frank Abagnale Jr. And he was actually teaching courses in school, like teaching at a high school, because he was posing as a high school teacher. All he did, or even at a university, I can't remember, but he was teaching. All he did was read one chapter ahead. And then he just presented the chapter that the students were about to read, and he was successfully able to pass himself off as a teacher. And most experts, in fact, there are people out there promoting this, saying, hey, here's how you can appear to be an expert. It's like, I have a wacky idea. Instead of faking being an expert by being 1 or 2 pages ahead of your audience, why not just be a real expert? Because a lot of us, including myself, every time someone claims to be an expert, I start checking to see whether that's true by the way they speak, and if and when and how they answer questions. If you ask a fake expert a challenging question, chances are, for some reason, your question doesn't get answered. So yeah,
Yeah,
there's a very low level
exactly.
of,
They'll
yeah,
deflect or go back to what they know or things like that. Yeah.
right. Yeah. There's a low level of trust on the internet because all these fake experts, and I want them all to go out of business. And I'm happy to do anything I can do to make that happen. And some of them are really famous, but the people who know less than them are happy to follow them because they don't know better. Literally, they just don't know enough to know that they're faking. Okay, so the next question is, and we're almost done here. I hope you have enough time for all these questions. Can you share your thoughts on the frequency of coaching sessions, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, that would align best with your needs or the needs of the people that you've served?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because one of the things I'm looking at doing, and I'm kind of pondering that very question right now, is setting up a mastermind for water system operators. There's a lot of technical training out there, but there's not as much in the way of actual management training. We're trying to get around that, and so what I'd really looked at is twice monthly for a mastermind format. Now this is looking specifically at a mastermind type format, but have set it up so that you do twice monthly, and then you have some other things that go on too. So there's probably something happening every week in the mastermind, but you're getting together the mastermind group maybe once a month. You're doing some individual sessions once a month, and then some other training, group training. So I would say 2 to 4 times a month is probably good for an ongoing training situation. That you you don't want to get it too much, and you want to keep it engaging, but you don't want to do it so infrequently that people forget about it too. So a minimum of once a month, but I really think twice a month is probably ideal for something like that. Every week might be a bit too much for most people because we get busy, and you can't necessarily do something every single week. So I would almost say ideally to me in looking at this is that twice a month would be good. Now, the problem with twice a month, that's every other week. And you're going to have to remind people a lot because weekly, you can kind of put it on your calendar. Twice a month, you can put it on your calendar, but people kind of forget the twice a month thing. So there's some pros and cons to that. But I think attendance, from what I've seen with the weekly stuff, attendance starts to tail off with people that can't make every session. And so do you need everybody there or not? There's a lot of things that kind of dictate that. If you're doing more of a training type of thing where um, there are, I would say every week then is probably good if people can just tune in and watch the video recording if they need to and engage if they need to, then that works as well. But if you're doing something intensive like a mastermind, probably twice a month would probably be a sweet spot, I think, from looking at this.
Right. So I want to ask you a question so I can distinguish those two, because you brought up a point that I was going to bring up just from my own personal experience, but you brought up the weakness of every second week because, people like routines. And now your schedule is it this week? Is it next week? Is it the 5th of the month? Or is it next week? Because, there's 5 weeks. So that can get a little
Right.
messed up and harm your attendance and their habit formation. So when you're talking about, you specifically said, twice a month is what you think is optimal for your own clientele and their needs. When you were talking about weekly training, are you talking about sort of training newbies or something like that? Because you were saying once a week would be better for something. What was it exactly that you thought weekly would be best for?
Well, I think it would be for like newbie training or kind of training where you're getting up there and doing a traditional training type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you sign up for a program that's every week and you get an hour of training,
Mm-hmm.
once a week. And I think that allows people to get into a routine and
Mm-hmm.
it's still not overwhelming because it's 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
The trick is what hour is that?
Mm-hmm.
Are Tuesdays better than Thursdays? Are afternoons better than morning? Should you do evenings, or really early morning? It makes a difference, not only, how often you do it per month, but what day of the week you do it and what time of the day you do it. So those are all important considerations, and it can, it's hard to get your mind around it sometimes too, because not every day and every hour and every schedule is going to be ideal for everybody. You're just not going to be able to do it. So, and it seems like, to me, like Thursdays are the day for me where everything happens on a Thursday. So it's kind of like, and then, I see a training I want to do and it'll be exactly the same time I'm doing my live YouTube show. So it's kind of like, and it's amazing how often you get conflict. So, but, Monday morning, first thing, probably not ideal, Friday
Mm-hmm.
afternoon, not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
So, what day of the week? Wednesday, hump day, maybe. Tuesdays and Thursdays seem to be kind of when a lot of people do things. I don't know if there's any science to that or not. So I'm kind of looking at that right now and seeing what is ideal for training. I'm not even opposed to doing evening stuff, but then you run into dinner hours and different time zones. I mean, there's really a lot of stuff to take into consideration to be able to reach out to people. And it turns out that the time slots that you figure out are the same time slots everybody else figures out. So everybody's doing all their training on the same day and time.
Yeah, I
So,
hear you there. Totally the case. And I'm really glad you brought up the idea of days and times because, yeah, it probably is. Even just sort of my email list shows this. Generally speaking, between Tuesday and Thursday, Monday and Friday are pretty much widely known as not being ideal. But let's use the example of the time it is where I am right now. It's 2:30 a.m. Tuesday morning. So there is no such thing unless you're working in a very specific regional. You're US. Most of my clients are North American, so we're dealing with a 4-hour range minimum. But in the real world, soon as you go online, now you're dealing with different days and times. That's not a small issue because it's not natural. Us as human beings don't think in those terms. So you're right. It's very intriguing. Maybe you and I should do some brainstorming on if I can help you on yours. And also that would be super valuable to anybody, not just your audience and your clients, but everybody, as a way to sort of pull attention to what you do, is to say, I've looked into this. I've done the experiment. This is how I did that experiment, because it really matters who your audience is, right? Is it international? Are they professional? Are they vampires like me and actually like being up when everybody's asleep? There may be no simple answer, but you brought a lot of sort of insight into the frequency how that interacts with the specific type of training. If we're starting from zero, then the consistency of weekly might be more desirable, but ongoing, they know it's okay. And especially if you have like a bulletin board or a Google form where they can drop the questions the moment they have them, because that's a significant concern for me with my students, or anybody, is like, you can reach out to me anytime. That doesn't mean I'll get back to you immediately, but don't wait until the class or the conference or the mastermind group itself to document that. There's an old Chinese saying, the faintest ink is better than the most powerful memory. And it's true. Just, if you give them that and you consider carefully asking your audience, what is the best time to do it? You're never going to get everybody happy, but at least that's going to maximize that attendance and engagement, plus giving them an asynchronous path to bring topics up as they come up in their mind, because everybody's too busy. One more thing to write down is just one more thing. Write it down, get it out of your mind. That's super powerful. Okay, so the next one.
Yeah, that's I was just going to say that, I mainly deal with U.S. and so you got mainly four time zones to consider if you don't take into account Alaska and Hawaii, but that's challenging enough. I just can't even imagine how you do it internationally. I mean, because it's you get some weird hours, and it's but getting everybody on the same page just through four time zones is challenging enough. So.
You said it.
It's tough. It's tough.
Well, mostly I just rely on Calendly. And today, I'm ashamed to say it, I thought I had solved it, but clearly I've still got some work to do. I completely missed Zoom, another one of these, because it was at an unusual time. I had my earphones out, so I didn't hear the alert. So now I've realized what I have to do is daily check my schedule, set alarms on my phone as well as my calendar reminders, is the closest I can come to being perfect, short of hiring a full-time assistant. That's not yet an option, but that's where I definitely want to go for exactly that reason. Add in the time zones and everything else. There's no way I can serve everybody who's my client, but I can do my darndest. And I normally am going to bed at 8 or 9 in the morning. My schedule goes from 9 a.m. to ideally when I wake up, which is part of the neuroscience of making the best of your brain. But mostly that's the case. But right now I still have 2 days a week that it gets compromised. One is my current in-country employment, which is necessary for my visa. And that's like Saturday at 4 p.m., but that means they have to wake up at 2. So for me, that's like, that's like you waking probably up at, not at 6 a.m., but you waking up at 3 a.m. when you're normally waking up at 6 or 7 or 8 a.m., right? So that throws me off, and that's why it's going to go bye-bye as soon as I can make it. Let's talk about the next one. What types of ongoing, on-demand support or mentorship would be sort of most beneficial for that training. So this is sort of outside the intensive or the regular training we've already discussed, but more towards the mastermind you talked about, that is ongoing, whether it is on demand or on a regular schedule. So this is types rather than schedule. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really think that and it increases the engagement and it's one level up, I think, from training because if you're part of a mastermind, then you can discuss your current issues with people who are in your same industry and knowledgeable, and then or I would act as a facilitator. We would provide some training within the mastermind, and then, but there's the opportunity to discuss things in more detail, dive deep on some specific problems, and then an opportunity that if I don't know the answers, to bring in somebody else from my, my database of experts, to kind of address a specific issue. And because you have that, I'm not saying that a mastermind is informal, but it's a little more informal than an actual training per se, in that there's some flexibility. You still want to have an agenda and keep things on track because otherwise it gets off track, and you want to keep it focused for people to get the most value. So I always think an agenda is important, and try to stick to the agenda as much as possible, but it's informal from the standpoint that you're able to dive into some specific issues and kind of follow some of those rabbit holes that are important to you, and get resolution on some nagging issues that you can't just asking questions in a more formal type of training. So I'm really kind of a fan of masterminds or something along that same format. I know there's some hybrid types of things that get done out there. I kind of lump everything under mastermind just because that's kind of what I grew up with in the business is, back, going all the way back to Napoleon Hill and his mastermind concept. That's kind of how I look at it. And I've been involved in some masterminds that aren't really masterminds, but they can be valuable if you have peers involved that are near peers and have the same set of issues, and so you can help each other, facilitated by the person facilitating the mastermind, um, and then you can really get it, deep dive on some of these issues, which makes it more valuable than some training, even answering questions. It's more of a deep dive, and I think that's good for some people, not for everybody, and obviously there's some cost to maintaining that, and you want to give value for that, so not just getting together and yakking about things, but the facilitator really needs to keep it focused. Let it go where it needs to go, but bring it back on track if it needs to get back on track. Stick to the agenda, respect people's time, but a little more free form than the actual training we might do either in person or online, and that can be really valuable to some people. And I think masterminds probably should have a specific life. Maybe you have an agenda for 12 months that you're involved in a mastermind, and if people want it to continue, then you can figure out a way to do that. But I think you should have an agenda set up for 12 months of meetings for a mastermind, and that might be enough time to address everybody's issues, and then maybe you switch it over to like an alumnus type of thing where you meet once a month or something, and at a little bit lower cost, where you can just kind of update each other, because really in a mastermind, you actually, for a lot of times, you connect with people like you wouldn't in a training, and you're kind of interested in their issues, and hey, what happened to that problem you were trying to solve, and you want to know the conclusions or just kind of stay in touch. So that's kind of, I haven't quite figured out that extension part, but I really think that a mastermind per se should have a specific time frame that it exists and can solve the bulk of people's problems, or at least get them on the right track, and then you can move on to the next group. It facilitating a mastermind takes some time.
Hmm.
You not only take the time that you're in the mastermind, but the bulk of your time as a facilitator really goes into the preparation. And that's, you want to have your act together when you get there. And so it gets at what you mentioned just earlier is people being able to ask questions ahead of time. This stuff is coming up and these are my questions. So you can actually pull in some information ahead of time and get some of those questions answered. And then there's going to be stuff that's just going to crop up, and you need to deal with that. But
Hmm.
that's where the near peer, the peer or the near peer group can really help on that. They're going to provide, as a facilitator, I'm not going to have all the answers to some or the experience. I'm not out there turning wrenches on water valves. These guys are. They're programming up the SCADA system and all that. Running the treatment system to remove iron from the water, and they're doing that every day. I'm not. So that's where the peers can really help each other. And boy, that it can be really powerful if it's done right. And the trick is doing it right. A lot of that is the preparation. You're
I
going to spend
so
a bunch of
love
time
that.
preparing.
For me, to me, that's the ultimate solution to, in a sense, everything, because it's dynamic. As you said, you become invested in the people. It becomes relationships, and it can go wrong, or it can become less and less productive if there's either too much diversity, that is diversity where everybody has separate things and aren't really helping each other or can't help each other, then it may be. So I really like your idea of the near peer, but also just a lot of what people call masterminds. It's like, this isn't a mastermind. This is people hanging out, trying to sell each other stuff. And I've been in way too many of those. And where it's sort of like, what is my ROI and what is my contribution? And if it's low on either of those, I have somewhere else I can be doing something else I know I should be doing, because we all have a scarcity of time. So
Right.
I I so agree with that, the whole idea of group genius. So to me, the perfect product that I would like to develop is exactly that, a mastermind with a clear but ongoing agenda. It was like, we're here to solve these culture and leadership problems as they come up. We meet on a regular basis with a focus on, we're not there to help ourselves. Our job is to help everybody else. But as a result, and literally using that as a filtering mechanism for the mastermind itself, it was like, how do you feel about being part of a paid mastermind in which your job is not to help yourself, but to help everybody else? And anybody who says, well, why would I pay for that, is pretty much automatically disqualified, because they can't see beyond the narrow lens of the fact that, well, hold on, that means there's 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 other people whose job it is to help me. But I just don't really want people coming in specifically with the all too common self-serving agenda, rather saying, I'm here to serve and others are here to serve me, where everybody's taking care of each other. And just like you're talking about, not only do you tap into the group genius, but we don't know what we don't know, and we can't anticipate problems that only a psychic can, and psychics are fake, just in case anybody wasn't sure. You could go, well, look, I've had, all this experience and such, but this came up. I have no idea what to do. And that's where it's, especially because it's dynamic learning or dynamic peer support and learning, that you can't package into the cookie cutter course. So, it's right there. It needs to be done. Okay, so
Just one more thing too on that is, I think for for the most effective mastermind, you really need to have some way to vet the people that come into it, whether it's a
yes.
questionnaire, whether it's an
Hmm.
interview, to make sure that they're going to contribute. And you need to be a little hardcore on that. You can't just let anybody in. Even if they're willing to pay the fee, they need to bring value to the group and the experience to the group.
Hmm.
And so there has to be a vetting process for the most
Hmm.
effective mastermind, and you need to stick to that. Not just somebody whines at you to get in and they don't contribute, or you're getting vendors in there, like as you mentioned, trying to sell to the water system. That's not productive. So
You got to kick
so you
them
need
out.
to be Yeah. You need to vet the people, and you can't be afraid to kick people out, like you say, and then just that's going to be your most effective, and you need to really pay attention to that. That's what's going to the a big part of the key to success in a mastermind is getting the right
Yeah.
people.
To exactly your point there, that's what mine is. I haven't got the mastermind. It's incipient, right? You need members for a mastermind, and I haven't found any or found any that I would accept. And the bottom line is, it's like, how would you feel about paying for something and your job is not to help yourself? If that's not okay with you, like I said, you're not big thinking enough to be part of the mastermind. Another question being, what was it? What are you bringing to this mastermind? It's like literally, I have a disqualification interview or qualification interview to address exactly what you're saying. If it's like, well, what do you mean? I'm paying you. You're delivering goods to me. It was like, how would you feel if I let in a bunch of self-serving jerks, or I let in a bunch of people who are as entitled as you are? I might or might not actually say that to them, that everybody was entitled and thinking everybody owed them something, rather than saying, look, let's help each other and make this really amazing. Just the difference. It's a culture engineering question, really, that if you don't do what both you and I think is critical, if you don't disqualify the ones that shouldn't be there, they will ruin the mastermind. They can easily destroy it. The ratio of people, or the ratio, Roy Baumeister wrote a book called The Power of Bad. And it turns out that the ratio is about 5 or 6 to 1. So that means any jerk, or let me use, what's the scientific term, asshole, who's in your group, who is there to do nothing but compromise. And psychological safety, saying you're wrong and here's why, is desirable. But if they're doing it in a way that is adverse, for every one person like that, you're going to have 5 more or less perfect people, and none of us are. So for every jerk who might actually bring real value but challenges a lot of people, you're going to need 7 to 10 other people to neutralize that negativity or get them out of there right away. Now, all sunshiny is bad too, but you literally, if somebody's going to be basically adversarial with everybody, kick them out, because they'll destroy your group, and there will be nothing you can do about it, shy of having the balls to do what you said. Be willing to kick them out and stick to your principles, saying this has to be of value to everybody. How would you feel if everybody else did what you're asking me to do for you? It's just going to be a group of selfish jerks. It's going to be what I call vulture culture. I want to create Nemo culture, where everybody's swimming in the same direction. So we have not much time left. I'm almost have to do my next interview. So how do you envision a course helping you address specific cultural or leadership challenges within your organization, or in your case, maybe your clients' organizations?
It really should be focused on, as I indicated earlier, practical information that people can apply. Theory goes so far. Theory works in some areas, but the practical applications are good, and it really needs to be something that is relatively easy to implement. As we talked about earlier, the resistance to change is a real thing. So it needs to be something that where you can give them bite-sized chunks, the old eating an elephant thing, bite-sized chunks that they can digest and they can implement slowly to change that culture. And those are really the two things I would focus on is small chunks and practical information. And I'd kind of gear all the information you give to people around those two, goals, I guess. I'll call them goals, but there may be a better word for that's escaping me right now. But that would be kind of how I would gear the course to present it to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm all about the practical knowledge. It's
Mm-hmm.
I can get all the theory I want out there, but show me how to apply it. And
Yeah.
that's what I think people are paying you for as an expert is show me what to do and how to implement it, because that's what I'm paying you for. I don't want to have to watch 25,000 YouTube videos, and maybe it's all in there somewhere, but I'm paying you as an expert to kind of summarize those 25,000 YouTube videos for me
Mm-hmm.
and give me the practical implication and how I can apply to my job in a little, a application plan or implementation plan in these
Mm-hmm.
small steps to kind of change things and get that cultural change that we need going. And that's it, and I really am, there are people that'll tell you, whatever you're selling me in the way of information, I can just watch a bunch of YouTube videos and get the information. That's probably true. But
Yes.
do you have how much time and what is your time worth to go and watch all those YouTube videos and do all that research and put all this together and stuff like that? That's,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of free information out there. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. How do you know what's good, what's bad? We're, as an expert, we're the filter, if nothing else, and we're
Yes.
the, we're summarizing it all, we're taking all, synthesizing it all into a package that can be implemented in a practical manner. And
Mm-hmm.
that's, I mean, there's probably not much in the way of new implementation or new information or programs. It's how you apply it
Mm-hmm.
and synthesize it to make it practical for people. And if you're a do-it-yourselfer, I tell, when people start on that, well, I can just watch the YouTube videos or it's kind of like, go for
Yes, you
it.
can. I love what you
Yeah.
said, because you said filter. That's what was going through my mind, and you actually put the word that was in my mind. Now, some people would be superstitious and think I psychically projected it, but that's not true. But that was the word I was thinking. It's like, yeah, it's out there, but can you differentiate the nonsense as a non-expert from what's true and filter down to what somebody really needs? It's like, for what I do and what you do, you could say, here's the problem, and you could literally tell them perhaps in seconds the solution and how to apply it. That's what you're paying an expert for. So I have only one question left, and that is, considering the potential impact to your organization, or again, the client organization, since you're an individual operator, what pricing model would you find most appealing to the kind of training we've talked about? That is, one-time payment, monthly, semi-annually, subscription. What model would sort of make the most sense to you if you were still running your small company, or in the context of working for larger organizations?
Well, based on my experience, I usually think one-time payments are good for people. I'm not a
Nice.
big fan of the payment plan. I know if you're doing more general stuff, like Amy Porterfield teaching you how to do an online class or something like that. Well, okay. Well, there's people wanting to get into that. They can't afford Amy Porterfield's prices, so they break it down into $500 payment. I don't know what her courses go for now, but I think they're around $3,000 for, some of
Mm-hmm.
these things. So, not a lot of people can just sit down and slap that on their credit card. So a payment plan for something like that, if you're doing 1 hour trainings and or even for a client like a water utility like I do, they're going to be a little cheap. So but I think charging them $695 for a couple day course, or an online conference, a one-time thing actually works fine.
Yeah.
If you're getting into these big ticket things that are for people trying to get into business and stuff like that, then I think that the payment plan works for them. But for my clients, I think they just want to do the one-time payment. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I will do, if you're doing a mastermind, something like that, um, that I may think is an exception that meets on a monthly basis, then I would charge by the month for that, but I would make it a 12-month commitment. So you get charged by the month, or give people a discount if they want to pay for the whole thing up front. You could knock a month off, whatever, but 12-month commitment, pay by the month, or 12-month commitment, and you pay for it all up
Mm-hmm.
front with a little bit of a discount for paying up front. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the pricing model I'd look at for a mastermind. But I'm not a fan. I've also heard that some people do quarterly payments, and those don't work well at all. So either an annual with a discount, or monthly if you're doing a payment plan, is what seems to work best. Any other type of payment, it does not seem to work. I've heard from folks. So, but mostly in my
Gotcha.
business, one-time payment, with the exception of the mastermind, I guess is kind of how I go.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because that was the answers that are overlapping. As an empiricist, when I'm talking about, I can either imagine what people need and want or think they is best, or I can just ask them. It's still empiricism, and it's right on the money again with my previous interviewee. And that was one time it was like, oh, I was actually surprised, but she's going, look, as a leader, when the money isn't a question because you're paying through an organization's resources, I just want to know, what is the cost and what do you deliver? And I also found it really insightful that you talked about how quarterly basically sucks. That doesn't work for people. And again, that makes sense. You're saying, I'll charge you monthly, but you got to commit to a year or pay all at once. Totally got you there. So I have to go because I have 3 minutes to take a bathroom break between now and my next interview. So it was really great I feel like I'm catching up because we actually do know each
Sure.
other. And
Yep.
I'll share it
Haven't
out
talked in a
there.
while.
I'll
Yeah.
share it with you. It's probably been over a year. So take care.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I will ping you with the interview when it's released, which will probably be soon-ish, but I'm not going to commit to a date. I can't promise yet.
Sure. Got it.
Okay.
Got it. Not a
Thanks very
problem.
much, Tom.
Okay. And that's pretty much what I do. Cover a wide range of topics, and it's kind of interesting, flipping flopping back and forth between the technical stuff, which is what my background is, and the MBA, which I have, style managerial consulting. But they do kind of blend together when you get into the niche market of water utilities, and so. And some of that stuff translates to general managerial consulting, but water utilities can have some very specific needs because of the way they're structured, and they're a utility. They answer to their stakeholders, their shareholders, the people that are buying the water. So there's a lot of unique needs there. There's some regulatory requirements that they need to meet that are unique to that industry. So you need to be aware of all that if you're dealing with that. So so that's what I do.
Excellent. So are you telling me that water is somehow so fundamental to life that we can't live without it?
Something like that. But
Okay,
the
nice.
funny thing is, Tim, is that um, people people just take it for granted, and it's you go to your faucet, you turn it on, and you expect nice clean water to come out, right? But people don't understand. They have no clue what goes on behind the scenes to get to that point. It's like you go and you plug in your charger for your iPhone, and you expect the electricity to come out and charge your iPhone. Nobody knows, you're not really thinking about what's going on behind the scenes. And water is even more so, because not only is it getting the water to you, but it's getting rid of the bacteria and all the potential contaminants that are out there, and getting stuff that when you turn on your faucet and get a glass of water, that is not going to hurt you in any way, that it's going to be that clean water that you expect.
Right. Well, and I mean, as you were speaking, I had two things. First of all, I'm listening to what you're saying. And secondly, I'm just imagining zombie movies. And that might seem random, but my point being, it's only when the infrastructure of society, all those things that break down, like you turn on the water, and in the case of a zombie movie, it might be mysterious black fluid or blood or nothing, that suddenly we go, oh, this isn't actually just a fundamental property of nature. Somebody makes this happen and it matters. Here in Japan, it's always a concern. They say you should always have some water in bottles because this is a country where earthquakes happen and could happen at any time. not that often, but in the 16 years I've been here, I've probably experienced very trivial earthquakes that where, they woke me up or whatever, it shook for a few minutes, but it can happen at any time. And soon as you get a significant earthquake, all utilities stop. Maybe not electricity is likely, but water is usually the first thing to go. And then you know how important it is. So agreed.
Pipes break, yeah. And we can actually go a lot longer without food than we can with water. So that's something to keep in mind too. So water is really, really vital and something that just not a lot of people put a lot of thought into.
Yeah. Well, unless they don't have it. It's
Yeah.
like a friend of mine said, anything is only important. I could be more specific, but I won't be explicit here, but it's only important when you're not getting it. Bottom
Okay.
line, water is something you take for granted until suddenly you're without it for a day or 2 days, and now your life is literally at risk. That's the window. Typically people say 2 days is pretty much the reasonable safe limit for most people before
Right.
they're getting serious health effects. So let's get into the actual interview now, and that is the first question. And then, hi there.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
I'm hanging in there for
Good, good.
it's a holiday here, but that doesn't mean anything to me usually.
I get that. I get that. So it's been a while. Let's start with this because I absolutely want to make sure that everybody is sort of on board and transparently informed. Is it okay if obviously I'm recording it right now. If it's okay if I record it and share it out on social media?
Yes, it is. So got to take
Awesome.
care of the legalities. Yeah.
Well, and it's also a matter of respect. It's sort of like some
Yeah.
people, though rare, it's like, why are you recording me? I default recording with the announcement to my private meetings. To me, it's just an easier way to keep track of, I can pay more attention if I have the recording to fall back on if I miss
Right.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. I do the same thing. I have Fathom, and it just automatically records all my Zoom meetings and team meetings and all that stuff, or whatever people are using these days. So, and it just helps, because you go back and and I'll share the recordings with clients and stuff, but
Right.
you can't.
I'm going to go off camera for a second here.
Okay.
Please continue. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, you can't always take all the notes you want while you're talking. So sometimes it's better to record it, and if you didn't remember how something was said, you just go back and review the tape.
You got it. And I'll take it a further step than that. It's always better to record it and therefore put your attention because, there's a few people left in the world, but pretty much everybody I know. And if they don't, I tell them whether they believe it or not. Bottom line is your brain can't do two things well at once.
Right.
Multitasking is a myth. So, if your goal is, among other things, to pay attention to what's actually being said and build the relationship, it's just a better idea to not worry about the notes. I take a few, but it's pretty minimal because I've got the other part covered. And speaking, this is sort of, I don't know whether I'll include this in the actual thing or not, but are you aware of DaVinci Resolve? I just have to share it because it's that darn good.
I've heard a lot of people that are using. I have not used it,
Mm-hmm.
but I've heard people are switching from Final Cut Pro and Premiere to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
DaVinci Resolve. So um, I've been mainly using, for my, because I don't do a lot of really complex editing. I was using Camtasia. I'm just using Descript now, and
Mm-hmm.
for what I do, Descript works great. But I've heard a lot of good things about DaVinci Resolve, their latest release, I guess. It's really
Yes,
nice.
yes,
So,
precisely.
but I don't know
Uh,
anything about it. I haven't looked at it. So,
right. Well, I'll say this. There's actually a whole category on YouTube right now. Why I'm leaving Adobe, fill in the name, the two you mentioned, Premiere Pro and the
uh,
other one, for DaVinci Resolve. Well, first of all, it's like $295. for a one-time lifetime license. At least it currently is. And I don't
Not a
think
bad
that's going to
deal.
change. It's not only a good deal for a fantastic program, and nobody's paying me to say this, but it's not only that, but it's so good that Premiere, Adobe is now reaching out to the people doing these videos saying, please, we're going to fly you to our headquarters. Like, obviously bigger YouTubers with bigger viewership, but we're begging you, please come to our headquarters and tell us what we need to do better to not lose you. Because the subscription model compared to $295 once for a lifetime is just not going to stand up unless that subscription becomes minuscule and they get rid of. Honestly, I've always kind of hated Adobe, and the reason is it has never not crashed on my system. So it doesn't even matter if I loved it. I can't use it properly.
Well, and their subscription model is just outrageous, and I realize they got to
Yes,
keep their profits up, and that's the problem with people doing, I mean, we've done the AppSumo stuff where people, you get these ridiculously great LTDs, but then there's no funds coming in. So you got to be able to sustain your business too. And
of
that's
course.
kind of the trick, but I'll take a look at it because yeah, it's kind of, I've been hearing good things about it. So probably worth checking out.
Well,
So,
even if for anything else, if, like you're saying, well, I don't do a lot of editing. It's like, well, I do more than you do, but I prefer not to. But here's the thing. I take this recording that we're doing right now. I press a specific button. I say transcribe from audio. It transcribes it at unbelievable speed with accuracy I've never seen before. And then I can also take one more button, one more right click, and say create subtitle track from audio, and it'll make that. And
nice.
like I said, it's not only remarkable, but now that you've got the transcription, I can then go and look for the specific words that I use for each question. This is what I did with the first one. You're my second interview, so I can say, oh, sorry, I gotta look ahead here for a second.
It's okay.
Oh, I'm on the wrong page. No wonder it's like this isn't the interview questions tab. There we go. Now it makes a lot more sense. So literally, I could just paste into the program what are the most, and it will find it, and then I'm basically ready to go.
Oh,
I don't
nice.
have to do anything, so I can chop up this video and then export
All right.
each piece as an individual file, and now I can put it on things like LinkedIn, which aren't going to take an hour and a half interview, and I can post them. I could do short form. For that feature alone, I would have happily paid $295. I'm an exceptionally cheap, exceptionally poor person who just does not buy software unless it's disproportionately beneficial to do so. And
Right.
it was worth it for even for a cheapskate like me. It was worth it. Okay, so let's
I will
actually do
check
some.
it out. Yeah. I mean, I've been pretty happy with Descript and to do all those things, but Descript costs, right around $300 a year, so
Oh
it's,
wow, there you go.
yeah, so
Now it's got some competition right there.
yeah, exactly. Although I will say, and if Da Vinci will do the transcription, like you say, that's the big thing about. I've tried a lot of transcription programs, and the accuracy is, especially if you get into scientific language like I do, and
Mm-hmm.
Descript has been exceptional in that regard. So I will, I'll look at Da Vinci, and because if they can do that, then that's worth the price of admission right there. Is not
Exactly.
having to edit transcripts for the captions. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that takes a huge amount of time to do that if the transcription is not accurate. So I value that a
Well,
lot.
yeah, I bet. I would love to also, regarding that, I would love to hear sort of your feedback on that because, I don't typically talk about the neuroscience unless somebody's, wants to geek out about it. So I haven't really tested it because I've only started doing this recently. And that functionality has only been added with 18.5 Studio Edition. Right? There's
Right.
lots of free stuff, but the neural engine that drives the transcription is in the paid version. But please, if you do try it at all, I would love to hear when you're talking about hydrogeological and the different, like you said, the different phrasing that's not common and how successfully it actually does that. So
Yeah.
anyway,
I'll check it
let's,
out. Yeah, because like I say, I've been seeing the YouTube videos too, and it's kind of like, okay, I don't know much about it, but I will, yeah, check it out. So,
I'm not much of a recommender unless I would recommend it to my best friend or anybody else who really matters, not for profit. So anyway, let's could you please start with this so that I can then put this in the introduction when I do hit. Please
okay.
introduce yourself and tell some people who the heck you are, because I know you, but they don't.
All right.